Imagine someone walking into like an occupied military zone, right? And they stand right in the middle of the town square and just start using the dictator's personal, highly trademarked catchphrases to announce a revolution.
I mean, that is a completely wild scenario. It's practically suicidal.
Yeah, exactly. But that is exactly what is happening in the first chapter of the most famous book in the world, and almost nobody notices it today.
Right. The original context is just totally lost on us.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission for this deep dive is based on a really fascinating producer briefing and prep document that breaks down the first chapter of the Gospel of Mark.
And by the time we finish unpacking these sources, the way you view this ancient narrative will be completely unrecognizable.
Oh, absolutely. We are going to strip away the soft, polite museum lighting and the modern religious familiarity. We want to focus entirely on the raw historical context, the intense political tension, and the incredible irony unfolding in just the first few paragraphs.
Because the contrast between how a modern reader perceives this text and what an original, first century audience would have heard is staggering.
It's night and day, really.
It really is. When you look at the actual historical and political realities on the ground during the Roman occupation of Judea, the opening of this document is anything but safe or polite. It is highly, highly volatile.
Volatile is an understatement, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you are expecting the traditional, comforting holiday story, this text gives you absolutely nothing.
No, there's no gentle introduction here.
Right, there's no birth narrative, no star in the sky, no wise men, no long genealogy tracing back through history. It just starts with a thunderclap.
That's very abrupt.
It's essentially the cold open of a modern action thriller. Zero backstory, just immediate jarring motion. We are instantly out in the harsh Judean wilderness.
Aventer.
Yeah. And there is John the Baptist standing at the Jordan River. And the text points out very specific details about his wardrobe, specifically that he is wearing a garment of camel hair and a leather belt.
Which is a very specific choice.
Right. Now, to someone reading this today, that just sounds like, eccentric desert fashion. Why does the author pause a fast-paced narrative to describe the guy's belt?
What's fascinating here is that wardrobe is a neon sign to a literate first-century Jewish audience. Mark is using a technique of pure show, don't tell.
Oh, like a visual shorthand.
Exactly. In the Hebrew Bible, specifically in the second book of Kings, there is a physical description of the great prophet Elijah. And it is a near exact match. A hairy man with a leather belt around his waist.
Wow. Okay, so it's not a coincidence.
Not at all. Elijah wasn't just any prophet. He was the quintessential anti-establishment figure who famously stood up to corrupt royalty, specifically King Ahab.
Right, so when John the Baptist shows up wearing that exact uniform,
any person in that culture instantly recognizes the reference. The author is communicating that the ancient tradition of challenging corrupt power has officially returned.
so it's not fashion, it's a political uniform. And the location matters too, doesn't it? I mean, he's not in the city square, he's out at the Jordan River.
Yeah, the geography is heavily loaded with symbolic freight. In the historical memory of this audience, the Jordan River was the massive entry point into the Promised Land under the ancient leader Joshua.
Like the original crossing.
Right. The crossing of that river historically signified the end of exile and the beginning of a completely new era for the people. So John, placing his movement right there at the edge of the Jordan, is a deliberate signal.
He's making a statement.
He is implying that the current establishment in Jerusalem is illegitimate, and that the true people of God need to come out to the wilderness to cross over and start entirely over again.
Man, it's like planting a flag of rebellion right outside the capital city. And the pacing of this narrative just refuses to let up.
It moves so fast.
It really does. Within a few verses, we transition from John the Baptist to Jesus himself, standing waist deep in that symbolically charged river. He's baptized, the heavens literally split open, and a voice speaks from the sky.
But there's a catch.
Right. The prep document highlights a really crucial mechanical detail here. The voice says, "You are my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased." But it's a private declaration.
Yes. And this is a vital piece of the dramatic irony Mark is building. Look at how power typically announces itself.
Usually with a lot of noise, right?
Exactly. A royal inauguration, or the ascension of an emperor, involves massive public spectacle. It happens in palaces or in the temple in Jerusalem, surrounded by scribes, political elites, and the military.
But here,
Here, a declaration of ultimate cosmic identity happens out in the dirt and the river water, largely hidden from the centers of power. The religious and political establishment in Jerusalem learns absolutely nothing about what has just occurred.
It is a completely covert inauguration, and the immediate aftermath is brutal. The text says the Spirit drives Jesus out into the desert for 40 days. He's out there among wild animals, facing Satan.
It's intense.
Why 40 days, though? Why the emphasis on wild animals in the desert?
Well, this operates on that same frequency of historical echoes we saw with John's clothing. A 40-day period of testing in the harsh wilderness consciously mirrors Israel's agonizing 40 years of desert wandering after escaping Egypt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it also maps onto Moses spending 40 days on Mount Sinai. The mechanism here is that true leadership and authority in this tradition are forged in profound isolation and testing, completely apart from human institutions before any public action can possibly begin.
So, if the wilderness was about spiritual isolation, that phase ends violently. The text transitions into harsh political reality with a single devastating phrase in verse 14.
It's a huge turning point.
Mark writes that John was taken into custody. The guy in the Elijah uniform is suddenly taken off the board. Who exactly is taking him into custody here?
This requires a clear look at the power dynamics of the first century. Taken into custody is a sanitized way of describing a Roman-era arrest by Herod Antipas.
Okay, Herod Antipas, who was he exactly?
Antipas was not a sovereign king, though he really liked to style himself as one. He was a pliant ruler, essentially middle management for the Roman Empire.
Middle management. I love that description.
It's accurate. Rome had installed his family to govern the region of Galilee and the area across the Jordan. He held a tetrarchy, which is a subdivision of the larger kingdom. His father, Herod the Great, had governed under strict Roman patronage.
Meaning his entire job was to keep the region quiet and keep the tax money flowing to Rome. And if he fails at either, Rome replaces him.
Probably violently.
Right.
Precisely. Client rulers were notoriously paranoid because their power was entirely borrowed. Antipas maintained his position through a heavy-handed combination of taxation, military force, and careful management of the Jewish religious establishment.
So a guy like John the Baptist is a massive problem.
Oh, a popular anti-establishment figure gathering massive crowds at the river border. That is a direct threat to the delicate peace Antipas is mandated to keep. Arresting John is a purely pragmatic move to eliminate a potential insurrection before it draws the attention of the Roman legions.
That context makes what happens next incredibly dangerous. With John sitting in a Roman-era dungeon, Jesus moves directly north into Galilee, which is Antipas's jurisdiction, by the way, and he starts preaching.
Right into the lion's den.
Exactly. His message is documented here as, "The time is fulfilled and God's kingdom is at hand. Repent and believe in the good news," which is usually translated as the gospel. Now, hold on.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and thinking, wait, I've heard the word gospel a million times, it just means a polite spiritual teaching, you aren't alone. I want to push back on this. Why would a paranoid Roman middle manager care about a rural preacher talking about good news?
Because the vocabulary Jesus is using was the exclusive intellectual property of the Roman Empire.
Wait, really?
Yes. The Greek word Mark uses for gospel is euangelion. In the first century, that was not a religious word at all. It was an imperial propaganda term.
I had no idea.
When a Roman general won a massive military victory, or when a new Caesar ascended to the throne, heralds would be dispatched across the empire to announce the euangelion, the official imperial good news.
So it's basically an official state press release declaring who is in charge.
Yes. Furthermore, decades earlier, the Roman Senate had posthumously declared the Emperor Julius Caesar to be a god.
Oh, I see where this is going.
That meant his adopted son, Caesar Augustus, and subsequent emperors like Tiberius, who ruled during this time, legally inherited the title Son of God. It was stamped on their coins. It was carved into their buildings.
Let me make sure I'm connecting these dots. To walk into a Roman-occupied territory and publicly announce a new kingdom while broadcasting your own euangelion about a different son of God isn't just a spiritual metaphor. That is intellectual property theft of the empire's ultimate authority.
It is practically treason. No Roman official could possibly hear the phrase, God's kingdom is at hand, and interpret it as a lovely metaphor about inner peace. Kingdom means territory. It means jurisdiction. It means a rival claim to power.
That is mind-blowing.
Jesus is taking the exclusive imperial vocabulary of the most powerful military machine on earth and applying it to a localized movement in rural Galilee.
Okay, so if Co-opting Roman imperial language was a macro-level threat to the empire. The sources indicate his physical actions were an immediate, micro-level threat to the local bureaucracy.
Oh, definitely. The tension just shifts locally.
Right. The narrative shifts to the town of Capernaum. What is the significance of this specific location?
Capernaum wasn't a sleepy, isolated village. It was a bustling, working customs town situated on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. It sat directly on a major international trade road, the Via Maris, connecting Egypt to Syria.
So it's a major hub.
Because it was a border town with a customs toll booth and a Roman military garrison, it was heavily regulated and closely monitored.
And the archaeological briefing on this is wild. Excavators have actually uncovered the foundations of the first-century synagogue in Capernaum. And literally right across the street, just a few feet away, they found a first-century dwelling that early Christian tradition identified as Peter's house.
The exact building where the text says Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law of a fever.
Yes. They are basically neighbors with the religious authorities. How did the local power structure actually function in a town like that?
Synagogues in the first century were not merely places of weekend worship. They were the center of civic life, education, and local justice. They operated under the watchful authority of scribes and priests who ultimately answered to the Sanhedrin, the high council in Jerusalem.
And the Sanhedrin had to keep the Romans happy.
Exactly. The Sanhedrin only maintained its tenuous grip on power by cooperating with the Roman governors. Power in an occupied state is a zero-sum game. The religious bureaucracy needed a strict monopoly on daily Jewish life to prove to Rome that they had the population under control.
Which means every time Jesus performs a healing, casts out a demon, or gathers a massive crowd in these towns, he is bypassing the established channels of power.
He's a wild card.
He is an unlicensed, uncredentialed figure operating in their territory. It's a jurisdictional nightmare for them.
And Mark illustrates that jurisdictional friction perfectly with the story of the leper at the end of the chapter. We have to understand the mechanics of leprosy under Mosaic law.
It wasn't just a rash.
No, this wasn't just a medical diagnosis. It was a complete legal, economic, and social exile. A person with a skin disease was ritually untouchable. They were required to live outside the camp and shout warnings if anyone approached. They were dead to society.
And the bureaucracy had very strict protocols for this, right? Like only a recognized priest could officially certify a cure and sign the paperwork to restore that person to the community.
Exactly. The priests were the ultimate gatekeepers of a person's survival. So what happens? Jesus doesn't refer the man to the priest for consultation. He bypasses the entire purity system.
He just handles it himself.
He physically reaches out, touches an untouchable man, which technically should make Jesus ritually impure according to the law, and heals him on the spot. But the crucial mechanism happens next. He commands the healed man to go show himself to the priest and offer the sacrifices Moses commanded for a testimony to them.
I love this detail. It's like showing up to a highly regulated government bureaucracy, like the DMV.
That is such a good way to put it.
You walk in, deliberately break their absolute strictest rule right in plain sight, and then politely hand the clerk the completed, signed paperwork just to prove to them that their bureaucracy doesn't actually hold the real power. You are forcing the system to officially ratify an action it had no control over.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, sending the healed leper straight into the heart of the religious bureaucracy wasn't a gesture of respect for their rules. It was a living, breathing provocation.
It really was.
It was undeniable proof placed right on the desk of the authorities that someone with a higher jurisdiction, someone operating entirely outside their monopoly, was moving through their backyard.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this part completely breaks my brain. We have these massive public provocations, the co-opted Roman language, the unlicensed miracles, the huge crowds, but running directly underneath all of this is a bizarre undercurrent of intense secrecy and deep misunderstanding.
Mark's use of dramatic irony is brilliant here. He forces the audience to pay very close attention to who is allowed to speak, who is aggressively silenced, and who actually comprehends the reality of what is unfolding.
Because no one acts the way you'd expect.
The cast of characters behaves in completely counterintuitive ways.
Let's look at the exorcism in the Capernaum synagogue. A man with an unclean spirit interrupts the teaching, and what does the demon say? I know who you are, the Holy One of God.
Right.
Of everyone in the entire opening chapter, the religious leaders, the crowds, the disciples, the demon is the only character who names Jesus correctly. The only accurate witness is a hostile entity. And Jesus immediately silences him. Why shut down the only guy in the room telling the truth?
This raises an important question, but think about the mechanics of a modern grassroots political campaign.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you are trying to carefully build a movement and establish your own identity, the absolute last thing you want is for your opponent's most toxic, discredited supporters to start publicly endorsing you.
Oh, it completely ruins the brand.
Exactly. The demon is telling the truth, but the truth is coming from a source that inherently corrupts the message. If the local authorities hear demons endorsing this new preacher, it gives them the perfect ammunition to dismiss the entire movement as dark magic or madness. Jesus has to control the narrative.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. But his attempt to control the narrative completely fails with the leper.
Yeah.
Jesus strictly orders the guy he just healed to keep it a secret. He says, say nothing to anybody, just go to the priest.
And what does the guy do?
He immediately blows the whole plan. He goes out and blabs to everyone.
And notice the consequence of that disobedience. The man who is supposed to be the quiet, bureaucratic proof becomes a noisy liability.
Yeah, he causes a scene.
His broadcasting creates such a frenzy, such an overwhelming mob of people wanting physical healing, that Jesus is functionally exiled. He can no longer openly enter a town and is forced back out into the deserted places. The healed man gets to go back to the city, and the healer takes his place in the wilderness.
The irony is off the charts. The demons know the truth but are gagged. The leper is supposed to be quiet but won't shut up. And then you have the inner circle.
Ah, the disciples.
Yeah, he recruits these 4 fishermen along the Sea of Galilee, Simon, Andrew, James, and John. The text says they abandon their nets and their father instantly to follow him. It reads like this heroic, decisive moment.
It seems heroic on the surface, sure. But as you read the entire narrative carefully, Mark is setting up a tragic dynamic.
Tragic how?
These men leave their livelihoods on the spot, swept up in the undeniable charisma of this new teacher. But they show absolutely no sign of understanding the geopolitical collision course they have just joined.
They don't know what they signed up for.
Not at all. They think they are signing up for a glorious, victorious restoration of Israel. They have no idea they are walking toward a Roman cross.
The disconnect between what the crowds want and what is actually happening is perfectly captured at the end of the chapter. The whole town crowds around Simon's door that evening, desperately bringing the sick.
It's a massive, undeniable success by any metric.
Right. The disciples must be thrilled. But Jesus doesn't stay to build his brand or capitalize on the momentum. Mark tells us he slips out before dawn, escaping to a deserted place to be alone.
It perfectly encapsulates the tension Mark has constructed. Think about the conflicting perspectives in this single chapter.
Okay.
The massive crowds. They just want a powerful local healer to fix their immediate physical problems. The demons. They recognize a cosmic destroyer who threatens their very existence.
And then the disciples.
They see a compelling new teacher and a ticket to relevance.
Yeah.
Mark has built a profoundly tense story where the most important realities are entirely silenced, deeply misunderstood, or spoken by the absolute wrong mouths.
It is an upside-down world. The tension in this opening chapter does not resolve, it only accelerates. I want to leave you, our listener, with a thought to mull over as you go about your day. It's a big one. Think about what it actually means that a movement like this, a movement deliberately started on a massive collusion course with both the global authority of imperial Rome and the deeply entrenched local religious bureaucracy, relies almost entirely in its earliest days on fundamentally misunderstood motives and the completely wrong spokespeople. It totally rewrites how we expect power, truth, and history to operate.
It really challenges our modern assumptions.
So what does this all mean? We really want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on the intense historical drama and the political tension we unpacked today.
We'd love to hear your take.
Did learning about the Roman origins of the word gospel or the bureaucratic trap of the healed leper change how you view the text? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the sources, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a session.
It really helps us out.
And definitely remember to check the description below for some exclusive links we've put together for you. You are going to want to buckle up because our next deep dive is going to be even more intense as all of this jurisdictional friction we discussed today completely catches fire.
The foundation of conflict has been laid, but the true clash of authorities is only just beginning.
The Polite Museum lighting is officially off. We'll see you next time.